welcome to An Equal Music, a writer and his other arts. Vikram Seth needs no introduction. In fact, he could easily be the lone subject of a literary festival. This session is dedicated to the mesmerizing 1999 novel that bears its name, and Vikram's incredible array of intellectual and artistic pursuits. Though best known as a poet and novelist, he's also a travel writer, a librettist, a gifted musician, a painter, a translator, a sculptor, and obviously an excellent manager of time. So, without further ado, please join me in welcoming to the stage Mr. Vikram Seth. There's a lot of technical glitches. Or is this the one with the technical glitches? Yeah. It's a lot of.
It is on. Actually, my problem was I was too far away from the microphone. Should we just? I sacrificed my espresso to a friend who, without further ado,
That's Vikram.
Yeah,
That's Vikram.
And now I'm left with chamomile tea. So if I go to sleep during the course of this,
it won't be my questions. It'll be chamomile tea.
Yeah, that's the unction you can place upon your soul.
Okay.
Not your questions.
It's a good start to things.
Well, may I introduce Asim? Asim, apart from being a friend and my couturier,
I'm responsible.
yeah, sort of, and a good valet, having put up. Are you Go on. Go.
Wow. I'm waiting for what's going to happen next.
Actually, this is kind of a jugaad session, clearly. Could we have a little?
I'm also definitely getting a tan right now.
Yeah, you could try something else. I want to see the audience.
Yes, that's
stop here, then.
That's true. I have a lot of familiar faces in there, so maybe different.
Asim, I was about to introduce you. Apart from being my friend in Couturier in New York, Asim is himself, as they say, not unacquainted with the art world. He himself used to scroll, doodle, as he modestly puts it, when he was younger, but also when I think you ran a gallery in Dubai.
That's right.
For 2 years or 2.5 years?
Yes, 2.5 years.
And had the first exhibition of, was it South Asia or Pakistani?
Contemporary Pakistani art.
Could you tell us a little about it, just by way of, setting the scene?
Yeah, of course. I had the opportunity to be in Dubai a couple of years ago, and I was there around 2006, and yeah, I curated a show of what I was told, and maybe a dubious claim, what I was told was the first show of Pakistani contemporary art at the time. And yeah, it included some notable people who also appear in the wonderful show that Qudsiya curated here. Muhammad Ali Talpur, who I know that his work, The Lineman, yeah. So that graphic piece in the first room is in fact his, and a few other people. So I had an opportunity to engage with their careers, and it was a great privilege.
Great. And do you have any musical connections? Or zilch?
I'm going to leave that to you.
Okay,
because, so, and in fact, we can just dive in. I think into the book. I'm sure that a lot of people here have read Equal Music, but for the unacquainted, if we're not going to just cast them out of this auditorium, maybe you could describe the plot of An Equal Music a little bit.
Sure. An Equal Music is a slightly odd book in many ways, in that I never expected to write about music.
Yes.
My first novel, I've only written 3 novels. My first novel was a novel in verse, set in San Francisco, The Golden Gate. My second novel, probably my best known novel, not necessarily dearest to my heart, but certainly my best known novel, is A Suitable Boy, that I call The Fat One. And the third novel is Unequal Music, which came several years later, not only because I like lying fallow for a long time, but also because I'm constitutionally lazy, not to find a point. And it came about in a very strange way. I was walking across Hyde Park. I was in London at the time with a friend of mine, and I saw in my mind's eye, I saw someone looking at the water of the Serpentine. And he was European, or white at any rate, tallish, in an overcoat. I didn't know whether he was Canadian or Scots or American or French. And I said, look, my next novel is going to be about that man. So Philippe, who's my friend, said, well, where's the man? So I said, no, he's in my mind's eye, ratio. So Philippe said, well, tell me about him. So I said, I can't, I expect you to tell me. Why is he staring at the water? Has he lost his job? Is he looking at the ripples and being scientific about it? Has he parted from his wife? Has he killed someone? What's happened? So Philippe said, I can't tell you that, but I can tell you his profession. So I said, and what is that? He's a musician. So I thought this was special pleading, since Philippe is a violinist himself. And I said, no, I'm not going to write about music. I love music too much. I'd lose my taste in music if I wrote about it. My training in studying classical music, I love Western music, especially Schubert and so on. Writing about music is, there's a danger in it, or obsession, or passion, or intimacy with the medium. It's whatever it is lost. In fact, someone said writing about music is like dancing about architecture. Yes. So I said, okay, he's a musician. Well, fine. I think if he is a musician, he should be a cellist, because I like the cello. Philippe says, no, he's got to be a violinist. I said, yes, Philippe, I know you're a violinist. But he said, well, the cello is going to be tactically difficult for you. You'll have to lug his cello about throughout the action of your story. And it's going to be much more easy for him to sort of busk with the violin or play here and there, whatever it is. So I bought it. And as a result, this book, Unequal Music, is about a violinist. It's about a violinist who comes from the north of England. I settled upon that because I didn't want him to be from London. I didn't want him to be from outside the UK. I wanted him still to be at a slight angle to the London universe. So he's from the north. He is the second violinist of a string quartet. Many years ago, about 10 years ago, before the action of the book begins, he was in love with a pianist, Julia, when there were students together in Vienna, in the Musikhochschule there. And they meet by pure chance with the passage of a bus. You couldn't get a more indie filmy situation. Two buses on Oxford Street are passing each other, and after 10 years he sees her in the opposite bus. So, I won't give the story away, but that's enough of a Salim Chala, just to give you an idea of how it starts out.
And I have always loved that narrative about how that Michael Holm character emerged to you. And I'd love to know how do characters tend to come to your mind? Is it through such fortuitous encounters generally, or if there is a single predominant way that they do come to mind?
Well, I think most novelists would say that some of the characters, especially if they've written just one novel or 1.5 novels, are people they know. People in their lives, people who could be elaborated to some extent from the people they know in their lives. Take A Suitable Boy, for example. One of the protagonists, the matriarch, Mrs. Rupa Mehra, is very close to my Nani. Who sadly, or maybe I should be relieved she didn't read the book because, she passed away by that time. But it's dedicated to my parents and to her. There are other characters, I suppose, Lata is not really my mother, but Haresh might be a little more like my father. Then there are people who begin as someone you know, but change during the course of a book because they encounter people whom they wouldn't have encountered in real life. And then there are other people who are historical figures, others who you kind of make up out of whole cloth, like Man, who to me is an enormously believable. I mean, I believe in Man, but where he comes from, I have no idea, since I don't know anyone like him. Maybe bits of me or... So, the answer to that is they come from everywhere. And the point is, when they're in the book, it shouldn't seem as if, you know, caste A comes from real life and caste B comes from something you've cooked up and caste C comes from history. Now, in the case of Michael Holmes, for example, this musician, he's not the easiest of characters. He's quite self-centered and difficult to live with. And part of my problem with him was that I was writing this novel in the first person. And that has to do with music. I'll explain the nexus between the first person and music later. But I found it quite difficult to live in his skin for 2 years.
Yes.
Because I'm not him. And I had to be him, especially since I was writing the narrative like I. Like, let me just read the first paragraph of the novel.
Actually, if you don't mind, because you did mention that beautiful scene in which Michael re-encounters Julia.
Oh, right.
So I thought perhaps if you don't mind reading that passage, which is here.
So, fine. See how I allow myself to be bullied.
I know.
We are stuck behind a line of buses just after the traffic light at the midpoint of Selfridges. I turn my head back slightly to see one of my favourite landmarks, the grandiose, lapis-robed statue of the Angel of Selfridges, with her attendant merman kneeling in homage. She and her eccentric building are the only thing on Oxford Street that make me smile. My eyes do not reach the Angel of Selfridges. Julia is sitting 5 feet away from me, reading a book. In the bus directly opposite, at the window directly opposite, is Julia. Her bus has stopped at the traffic light. I begin to pound the window and shout, "Julia! Julia! Julia!" She cannot hear me. We are in separate worlds. "Stop reading, Julia. Look out of the window. Look at me." Around me, the passengers stop talking. The schoolgirls gasp. In the bus opposite, no one seems to notice. I keep pounding the window. At any moment, her bus or mine will move off. She smiles at something in the book, and my heart sinks. A man sitting behind her notices me, and the commotion that has resulted. He looks mystified, but not alarmed. I gesticulate and point desperately, and with great hesitation, he taps Julia on the shoulder and points at me. Julia looks at me, her eyes opening wide in what? Astonishment, dismay, recognition. I must look wild, my face red, my eyes filled with tears, my fists still clenched. I am a decade older. The lights will change any second. I rummage around in my satchel for a pen and a piece of paper, write down my telephone number in large digits, and hold it against the glass. She looks at it, then back at me, her eyes full of perplexity. Simultaneously, both buses begin to move. My eyes follow her, her eyes follow me. I look for the number at the back of the bus. It is 94. I grab my record and get down the stairs. I'm given a wide berth. The schoolgirls are whispering in tones of wonderment. Foo, Sue, no, Foo, no, Sue. The conductor is coming up the stairs. I can't get past him. I have to stand aside. I'm losing time. I'm losing it. Finally, I get down, push my way past a couple of people, and jump off the moving bus. Weaving across the traffic, I get to the other side. I have lost too much time. Her bus has moved away. It is far ahead, with a number of buses and taxis in between. I try to push through the crowd, but it is too thick. I will never catch up. A taxi lets out a passenger. A young woman, her hands full of shopping, is about to grab it when I interpose myself. "Please," I say, "please." She takes a step back and stares at me. I get into the cab. To the taxi driver, I say, "I want to catch up with the number 94 in front." He half turns around and then nods. We move forward. The lights turn yellow against us. He stops. Couldn't you go through, I plead? It's not red yet. I'll get my license took away, he says annoyed. What's the hurry anyway? You won't save much time. It's not that, I blurt out. There's someone on that bus I haven't seen for years. I've got to catch her. She might get off it. Take it easy, mate, says the driver, but he tries his best. Where our single lane broadens out into a bus bay, he overtakes a bus or two. Then the street narrows and we can do nothing. Suddenly, everything slows down again. Only couriers on bicycles squeeze swiftly between the lanes of traffic. Can't you try to get off Oxford Street and join in further along? He shakes his head. Not here, you can't. After one more tricky feat of overtake, the driver says, look, mate, I'm nearer, but to be quite honest, I won't make it, not on Oxford Street. It's usually slow, but not as slow as this. Your best bet now is to get out and run for it. You're right, thanks. That's £2.60. I only have a £5 note in my wallet and I can't wait to be given the change. I tell him to keep it and grab my satchel. Hey, not that door, he shouts as I open the one on the right. But I know I have no chance against the crowds on the pavement. My one hope is to run between the opposing streams of traffic. Sweating, diesel-gassed, unable to see clearly through my most inconvenient tears, I run and stop and gasp and run. On the other side, the traffic speeds up, but ours remains blessedly still. I catch up with the bus a little before Oxford Circus. I cut across and get on. I try to run up the stairs but can't. I walk up slowly, in hope and in dread. Julia is not there. Where she was sitting are a small boy and his father. I go to the very front and look back at every face. I go downstairs, I look at every face. She is not there.
In that passage, he says a decade older, and you do get the feeling that much of the novel is preoccupied with the passage of time, and certainly when equal music emerged, relative to its preceding novels, Suitable Boy and Golden Gate, it did seem to have a more kind of melancholic strain to it. What do you attribute that to?
I wouldn't draw too immediate or too, it's unfair, in terms of the question, too facile a connection between the state of mind of, say, the author, or the fact that the author might be older and wiser, older and stupider for that matter, 10 years on, or the fact that, Mozart could write his most happy music, some of it, at a time when he was suffering most grievously from melancholy, or vice versa, I have no doubt. Some things are born of the mood in which you are. Some things are born almost as a counterpoise to the mood in which you are, almost as if you need something else. So again, let's say in the 2x2 grade of, melancholy, non-melancholy author, melancholy, non-melancholy work, I think that all the squares will find themselves filled one way or another. So in this case, I think part of the aspect of melancholy comes from the very structure of the fact of Julia's, not to give too much of the story away, there is a great secret at the heart of Julia's condition now, but she is, for example, married, and that comes out very clearly quite early on. I think that because, again, touching upon the first person aspect of the narrative, because Michael is writing in the first person, the more vulnerable, the more jittery, the more insecure aspects of his character come out in a clearer way. If he writes in something that is not exactly stream of consciousness, but certainly jagged and not necessarily closely related thoughts, that shows an aspect of his disturbance. His longing, his yearning, his realization of the impossibility of certain things, and yet despite that his will to perhaps make them happen.
So to go back to this question which I've touched upon twice, this music first-person question. Of course, you notice it's in the present tense as well, which gives it some kind of aspect of immediacy. But also the aspect of almost writing a diary. Now, with music, I find that if you write about it in its technical aspect, and there's a fair amount of technical stuff floating around in the book, it sounds too much like program notes or a kind of dissertational, okay, he's trying to, it's not a novel, it's more like a novel, a story against a backdrop of endless, so therefore they're modulated to the dominant, and she didn't, winch her, she didn't play the leading note quite as sharp as one would have expected, and so on. So the only way I could get around that was by writing it in the first person, so that all these musical aspects became a part of Michael's own obsessions, and therefore would be taken on board both as the writer, for the writer and the reader, as something intrinsic to his being. So what I needed to get around that particular problem then led to the fact that a first-person narrator comes with a lot of baggage, and also a lot of lack of baggage. You can't be where you couldn't be. You can't describe a scene where you aren't, where you are not there. Whereas a third-person narrator can. Secondly, you're an unreliable, intrinsically unreliable narrator. You are blind to your own foibles. You are blind to your own selfishness. And you are blind to your own obsessive nature. And Michael has all of these in good measure.
Nostalgia as well. Michael is in a very nostalgic frame of mind in the course of the narrative. In fact, there's that's sturdy. There's a
something's falling off.
Is it? Oh, sure.
Late.
I'll retrieve it in due course. There is a beautiful moment here where Michael is describing his first experience of orchestral music, and I hope that it's a very short bit there.
He was introduced to classical music. His father was in fact he was a butcher. Lived in a town called Rochdale, not far from Manchester, in the northern part of England. And it would not normally have been the case that he would have been introduced to music, except that a neighbour of his, Mrs. Formby, saw some potential in this young 7-year-old, realized that he would gain something from her own love of music. She was a violinist, and in fact later, during the course of the book, there are two love affairs. There's a love affair of Michael with Julia, and also there's a love affair of Michael with his violin, which is lent to him by Mrs. Formby, and which is the instrument of which he plays, and that forms a part of the book, because it's lent, not given at that stage. And Mrs. Formby took him to a concert when he was 7 years old, perhaps. Into my mind comes an extraordinarily beautiful sound. I'm 9 years old. I'm sitting between Mr. and Mrs. Formby in a state of anticipation. On the seats all around us are people chattering and rustling programs. Into the circus ring, because this performance was actually an orchestra performing in a circus area, though it was an excellent orchestra. On the seats all around us are people chattering and rustling programs. Into the circus ring enter not elephants and lions, but a group of men and women, many of them bearing amazing instruments, gleaming and glowing. A small, frail man enters to applause, such as I have never heard before, followed by the strange, absolute silence of a multitude. He brings out a stick, and a huge and lovely noise fills the world. More than anything else, I want to be a part of such a noise. I love that. I think it's the Halle Orchestra, which used to quite often play in surprising venues. One of the great orchestras, historic orchestras of the world. That was Michael's first introduction to music. By the way, I said 7, but it turned out to be 9. But I'm always corrected by readers who say, no, she wasn't called Savita, she was called Veena. I said, are you sure? I said, yes. Then I suddenly remember, yes, that was my first draft. And in order to distinguish her from Savita and Saida, I didn't want it to remain, what was the name I suggested? Sudha, whatever. I had to change her name to a different letter. Yeah. Well, one thing I perhaps should read, perhaps, I mean, if I might,
Of course.
that's fine, is the afterword to the book, where I just write something, the author's note. Music to me is dearer even than speech. When I realized that I would be writing about it, I was gripped with anxiety. Only slowly did I reconcile myself to the thought of it. Then various thanks to other people. But that really was my concern about writing this novel. And funny, and it did not happen, I'm happy to say. When I was writing A Suitable Boy, there are a number of musical characters. There's the ghazal singer, Sayyida Bai Firozabadi. There are other singers. There's a lot of music, film music from Didar and other movies. And then what is closest perhaps to my heart is the music of Ustad Majid Khan, who sings Khayal. And Lata is a student of his, Lata, the protagonist of the book. And what happened during the course of writing that book, and it took a number of years, was that I tried to do my riyaz, I tried to tune my talpura, I tried to sit on the roof at dawn with the peacocks mewing and meowing in the background, and tried to sort of sing Lalit or Bhairav or whatever I wanted to sing at that time. And I couldn't. I found I couldn't. I was dragged back into my book. And at that time, I realized I couldn't live without music, and yet I couldn't do Hindustani classical music. So I was saved by a friend of mine, really, the Austrian ambassador, who was a wonderful pianist. Perhaps that's what he should have been doing rather than diplomacy. Really wonderful pianist. And he said, I know you love Schubert, so why don't we play and sing Schubert together? So I said, look, my sight reading of Western music is very uncertain. He said, well, do it in the style that you do Hindustani classical music. Listen to a CD of someone like, Hans Hotter or Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau or something, and then do Winterreise with me, and just follow the line. In other words, do it in the Indian style of the Guru Shishya Parampara or the Ustad Shagird Silsila, and do it in that style. And that saved my sanity, I would say. For a number of years, I was doing a lot of Schubert Lieder and not much Indian classical music until that book was over, until A Suitable Boy was over. And perhaps that is what I feared when I was writing unequal music, that my love for Western music, which was quite a late love, would disappear. But it didn't.
And you mentioned leader just now, and anxiety as well.
Right.
I don't want to sort of contribute to the sense of anxiety or induce any more, but I do feel obliged to tell you that there's a very unpleasant sounding word that circulates in a lot of descriptions of you. It's a very unpleasant sounding word. Do you venture a guess, Vikram?
Like, take me to your leader?
Close. Close. Actually, it's polyglot.
Polyglot.
Which is distinctly unpleasant. And actually, it refers to someone who has the ability to master many languages. So, how many languages do you actually speak?
I said it's a very complicated question, I don't know how to answer. But I said it in Chinese, just to have it up.
Hopefully he gave a hint to someone and a Chinese speaker later can decode or demystify whatever happened.
The point is really, I only speak two languages, I suppose I could say. In the sense that in these two languages, whether they call them, English of course is clear, but Hindi, Urdu, Hindustani, whatever it is, it's less. Yeah. But the other languages, which I have some knowledge of, in some cases a mere smattering, I couldn't really claim to speak them like a native speaker because from time to time I pause to ask myself, you know, to translate, to stop and translate. And another test is whether I would rather read a book in that language or a good translation of it in a language that I claim really properly to understand. And I would say the real problem is, though I can understand, say, German or Chinese or whatever, I may not get every register of it that I might actually get more of from translation. Now, that's not true with poetry. Okay. Now, with poetry, it's worth the effort of learning in the original language, because so much is lost otherwise. But in prose, I would say these two.
I think that's a very high benchmark, though.
Fine, good.
Two languages, I don't know. But that makes me feel very good.
What was the nexus between that question and our previous discussion? Was it just to discomfort me? Or?
I think pretty much. Yeah. Make the audience feel good or bad about themselves. You know, moving on from writing about music, and we were discussing poetry just now. You've also set writing to music, and I thought we could talk now about the four libretti that comprise The Rivered Earth and how that project came into being.
The Rivered Earth is when I'm between books or large books, I'm easy prey to people saying, hey, you know, why don't you do this commission, or why don't you write something nice for us so that we can set it to music. Now, I'm usually unwilling to do that, but with Alec Roth, who's a wonderful composer, he set some of my poems to music, and I liked it so much that when he said to me, could you write a song recital for me, I thought, well, I shall. And this grew into a 4-year commission from the Salisbury, Lichfield and the Chelsea festivals, where each year I would write a different libretto. A libretto, by the way, just simply means little book, but what it in effect denotes is a text that is going to be set to music. At some point we'll have to change positions so that they can see your better profile. I can, Democrat. So, what do you think? No. Now or later? As far as the libretti are concerned, the first one was set in China. It was called Songs in Time of War, and it's a set of translations of the poetry of Du Fu, an 8th century Chinese poet. The second was set in England, in fact in the very house George Herbert, a metaphysical poet, English poet, whose house I was living in, on the banks of the River Nadder. I wrote some poems in his style, so that was a European and English thing. The third, I moved back to India, or I should say to the subcontinent, and took texts, both secular and religious, and translated them, and also added some poems of my own. So those are the first 3 years, and you could say there were 3 different dimensions in space. For the 4th year, I didn't know quite what to do, and I didn't want to go to some other region. I didn't think I knew any other regions well enough. I couldn't write about Iceland or Australia or wherever. So what I eventually decided to do was to write about the elements of these 3 culture zones. Europe, as we know, has 4 elements: earth, air, fire, water. Indian philosophy adds a 5th one, space. And the Chinese classical elements are fire, water, earth, metal and wood. So earth, metal, wood, space, and whatever the other 3 are, fire, air, water. So here we are, 7 elements, and I called this last year's thing 7 elements. And in front of each of them I did a piece of calligraphy, but Asim will come to that later. So we're still on the musical theme, and perhaps was the idea that we should play a little bit of that, or what's your?
Well, we'll get to Fire, which is from the 4th set that you were discussing just now. I do want to note, however, that the photograph behind us, Vikram took that photograph. And I had the pleasure of visiting you at BEM. Vikram and I know each other. We have a dear mutual friend, Nasreen Rahman, Chini Halala from me. and
Who interviewed me yesterday?
who interviewed, I think some of you might have been there for a wonderful interview yesterday. And
the first time we met, if I recall, us.
that is right.
Might have been there, or have we met a couple of years ago?
We met. I was much smaller. We met once in Jeannie Halla's London flat, but then I was invited out 2 years ago to meet you at Bemerton, and I can attest to the grounds of the estate being that magnificent. That's not just your deft work on Photoshop.
Well, you know, I took that very early on a misty morning. Sometimes it's so beautiful on the river. There's snow all over the banks, and then there's the river Nada, and sort of white swans swimming past with a snowy background. You can just barely make them out, and it's almost like a black and white photo. This one I decided would work quite well because there's plenty of space for the title, as you can see. So that's
fit. That is rather convenient. All to plan. But we do have fire. We have a little audio track which we can. Well, am I doing this or are you? Sort of.
Yeah, one of the poems is called Fire. When it was set to music, yeah, I'm going to use it.
There we are. Excuse me.
What happened was that I wrote a much more sober version of Fire, but Alec decided that it wouldn't work because it was full of references one way or another. So he sent me back to the drawing board and made me. I'll just discuss it because of time. And then I sent him this text, and he was sitting in a library at the time, and he almost fell off his chair. He thought, what is this spelling? F-A-Y-A-A-H.
Yeah.
D-I-Z-A-Y-A-H. I'm sure, Vikram's got all sorts of Indian names in it. Suddenly he realized that what I was saying was Faya, and he almost had to be ejected from the library because he started laughing sort of uproariously. Most of the poems are quite serious and quite dark, actually, to use your word melancholy. But Faya was an exception, and probably that's why it appealed to you.
Yes. Well, I had two choices, and the other one I didn't think that. But also talk because you do. There was. I don't know who caught it briefly, but there was a slide of one of your calligraphy works. This one, in fact, which we thought would be appropriate.
This is rather a fattened version. It's not an oval, it's a circle.
It's distended.
It's distended. Well, I don't know what to say.
People were falling earlier. Count your blessings, Vikram.
Actually, no wonder.
Is in Chinese classical calligraphy, which is not done with a pen or with any kind of cut reed, but actually done with a brush.
Does this work? Yes, sir. So it's done with a brush. And the Chinese have for millennia used the same implement that they use for painting, for calligraphy. And one of the wonderful things about Chinese calligraphy is this, that you can read it as for the words, for its text, which may be a couple of lines of poetry, or you can read it as a painting, in structure, black and white, with a little bit of red for the seal. Or, and this is the most interesting in a sense of all, you can read it as music, as something going through the artist's mind through time. Why? Because you can tell in exactly which order every stroke is made. It's not like a painting where if I'm painting Asim, I might paint his left eye first, and then his right nostril perhaps, and then maybe the bit of white hair is growing over there. So you can't tell in which order I've done that. And then that fugitive smile. But not quite Mona Lisa like. So, but with the calligraphy, you can tell exactly where the artist, where the calligrapher dipped his brush, usually he, because though in poetry there are a number of very fine Chinese women poets, in calligraphy the tradition has been dominated by men. So where it dried, where it paused, why the space, so you can read it through time as you can music. So that's a very interesting aspect of calligraphy in Chinese. I spent many years doing Chinese calligraphy, and in fact, in front of each of these libretti, probably to fill out space because it was a slim book, my publisher said, "Could you do some sort of writing?" So in front of the Indian one, I did a little bit of Surdas, and in front of the English one, I did one of the poems I wrote, shaped poems. But the two places where I actually did not handwriting but calligraphy were the Chinese, and if you have the Chinese one, I think the Chinese one perhaps, if it's available.
Yes, there we go.
Yeah. So the Chinese one is 2 lines of a poem by Du Fu. The 2 lines, it's a poem which I read the last time, which was a Guopo Shan, what's that? The state is ruined, but mountains and rivers still survive. In other words, no matter what is happening during this disastrous civil war, the country, it's in its spirit, will still survive. And these 2 lines are 5 characters in each line. Feng Ho Lian San Yue Jia Shu Di Wan Jin. Beacon, fire, connect, 3 month. Now you can see the character for 3, I suppose, it's clear enough, right? Beacon, fire, connect, 3 month. That month is actually a moon, in fact, in the old style. Home letter worth 10,000 gold. Grammatically it's very parallel. The 3 parallels 10,000. The month, which is a measure word, parallels gold piece. So what he's saying is the beacon fires, which are representatives of the war and which are signaling mechanisms, have been going on for 3 months now. The war has lasted 3 months. And I'm separated from my family, and if only I got a letter from home, it would be worth a ton of gold to me. So these are the 2 lines of calligraphy. It's written in something called Xing Shu, which is, or Xing Cao. It's a sort of connective style of writing, unlike the formal, very clear calligraphy which you find in printed text, which is more like Kai Shu. And then to the left, I've written, that's my name, Xie Bin Lang, Shu Yu Qiu Shui Zhang. Xie Bin Lang is the closest you can get to Sage Vikram. Shu Yu wrote this in Autumn Water Manor, which is the name given by my Chinese calligraphy teacher, Jiao Yizhou. It was given by him to the old rectory Bemerton, because I moved in there in the autumn. And we were walking over the bridge, and he said, that's going to be the Chinese name for this place. So that is it. And the seal, unfortunately, is not in red, but it is in the original in red. Here again, it's rather distended, but at least in the Chinese it doesn't look quite as odd in the Arabic. Now, the Arabic is a different story altogether. I know that other than Chinese, the other great tradition of calligraphy is the Arabic tradition. When I met my teacher, Nassar Mansour, who's a Palestinian, whose own teacher is a Turkish master called Hasan Chalabi, which is interesting because the Turks now tend to use they do use the Western script, but the traditional calligraphy in Turkey is still very, very strong. He said to me, well, what do you want to learn? I know that in the subcontinent you use Nastaliq. And the Turks have a very monumental Nastaliq called Tariq, which is very remarkable. I said, no, I'll study whatever you are most enthusiastic about. Now, he is a great expert at what we would call thuluth or sulus, which is this rather monumental form where the noons and the swad and so on swoop downwards. And also at muhaqqaq, where you can get more lines of the Quran Sharif because you have a more scimitar like ye and noon and sin, all that sort of. The loop below is rather compressed. And he's one of the world's great experts in muhaqqaq. But he thought that I should study thuluth. So this is what we have.
Hitachi.
Yeah, we have Hitachi there. So while we wait for the ellipse, let me tell you about it. There's 7 elements out of it in Arabic. Ma, nar for fire, earth for earth, khashab for wood, ma'adan for metal, and hawa for air, and faza for space. So these 7 form a kind of, I arrange them in a sort of mandal or a roundel. In such a way that the curves of the elements themselves.
It's the apocalypse.
It's fine. It's contrapuntal. It's like and the nuqtas, the dots, have been arranged in a certain way, where as a result you get the constellation, which is still known in many ways for its individual stars because of the great Arab astronomers. The stars of the Great Bear are the arrangements of 7 of the nuqtas, and 3 of them, which also go with the 3 hamzas, are at the top of it. And luckily I did it in 2011, which is I think 1432 or something. So you get the first 4 integers thrown in as well. So it's a kind of inclusive in the 7 elements, but you can't have it. Anyway, there it is. How are we doing with it?
I think, but you know, I mean, just
Let's
you know, we'll deal with it. So, you know, I mean, I want to ask you because you are engaged in so many things. Obviously, you're passionate about calligraphy. You know, you're passionate about music. I want to ask you, when you are engaged in your other arts, so to speak, is there the same pressure than when you're working on something that you know is going to be consumed by the public?
I don't think there's the same pressure. But then I've never really allowed that pressure to work on me even with literature. In the sense that people say, well, you know, why do you try these different forms? I say I try them not in order to be various or poly, whatever you want to call me. The kettle on. It's just that if I'm gripped by something, then, and I have the time and the capacity to try it, I do. What's the worst that can happen? You fail. Okay, well, big deal. And I'm not so concerned about that. But it is true that, you know, if you're doing something which is seen to be your vocation or your profession, like writing, then there is an aspect of will it work? I do try to push that aside as much as possible. As far as the other arts are concerned, whether it's calligraphy or painting or sculpture, the one thing I have to tell myself is this: okay, you know, it can be displayed, fine. But there's no point in doing something which is good considering that you're a writer. You know, that's not an excuse. If you put substandard work, you take people's time to do that, or if you do something that is going to make your teacher embarrassed or ashamed of you. In fact, Nasr Mansour and I, this is around the time of the Arab Spring, we sent lots and lots of emails across to each other. He said, "Nay, I don't think you're Ra." They call Ra. I don't think that's right, and it hasn't got the right curve, and the ink is too runny here, it's too thick there. He was very exacting.
Yes.
And just as you saw the signature on my Chinese work, I asked him, you know, in Chinese calligraphy, however amateurish it is, your signature is an intrinsic part of it. What should I do with this? Is it necessary to have it? Is it necessary not to have it, or is it optional? And he said, classically, or traditionally rather, until you got your ijaza, your teaching certificate, given by your master, your ustad, you really shouldn't sign your work. So that's why my roundel Arabic rhyme. He said, but however, if you want to, these are the possibilities, and he did a few for me. But I forbore from doing that because it wasn't in the tradition. So what was your question?
You know, I don't even remember.
Doesn't matter.
You lost me.
Yeah.
Something like that. But there is, I don't want to strain our technical resources, but we did have a video that I don't know if it's